Right, so we're we're still continuing 7.3, developing a simple spreadsheet. And the last time we would have looked at the functions, some different functions and how we can use those functions. And yes, we stopped at VLOOKUP, so we have to continue with relative and absolute addressing and manipulating rows and columns. Then you'll have, well, you were supposed to submit these questions here as your homework, and you were supposed to have already submitted these exercises as your assignment. So tomorrow we'll have presentation on that. Right, so let's get started with relative and absolute addressing. Now let's see who will read for us today. Literal, I want somebody to read and take their time. Literal. So apparently Literal's mic suddenly is freezing. Malik, you can help with the partner.
Open, sir?
Could you read relative and absolute addressing?
Ah, come in there. Yes. Copying formulae can be extremely useful. Consider the spreadsheet in Figure 7.29a, where a 5% discount is calculated on 3 data plans. As you create a spreadsheet to automatically work out the discount on each plan, you want to copy the formula to other cells and keep the discount as it is.
Alright, good. Just
The
pause there.
formula is good.
Good. So it says to look at figure 7.29, and yes, that's this one here, and we're looking at E. So what it said there is that we have a 5% discount, and instead of retyping formulas, I would have shown you guys how you can copy the formula so that it makes entering data much faster. But when you copy the formula, the cells would change. So in the image here, you guys can see my screen? Right. In the image here, in this figure, we have a 5% discount. And over here, in this column here, we are putting the amount of discount for that item. So 24-hour is $10. How much will 5% be for that? $0.5. Now you want to calculate how much 5% will be for $50, how much 5% will be for 1,000. So if you wanted to copy this formula, what would you do? What would you normally do? What are you supposed to do? Anyone?
Sir, autofill it into the rest.
Very good. Autofill. So you click and drag. You go to the very corner here, and you can change to a crosshair, something like what the icon just changed to, and you click so that the formula is copied. Now, when that happens now, say if we have equal A1 plus A2, if we want to bring it down, what happens now is that when you bring the formula down or you autofill, the cells automatically increment. So the cells change to adapt to the new cell. So this is called referencing. What is the term? Relative addressing. The cell changing to another cell to allow you to do the new calculation. So with this image here, this 5% would be inside of this formula here to get you this 0.05. But when you bring down this formula here, what cell is the 5% in?
Sure, B1.
Good. Now, it's in B1, so somebody else other than Nicholas. When I bring down this 0.05, what would B1 change to?
Sure, B2.
B2, very good. B1 will change to B2 because it is going down. We're copying the formula downwards, so it will go down also. So if I copy it down again, it will turn to B3. But in that case, we don't want the 5% to change. So this is where absolute and relative addressing comes into play. So Malik, continue reading the formula.
From how far, sir?
The formula in cell C3.
The formula. Oh, the formula in cell C3 is equal B3 asterisk B1. If cell C3 containing the formula is copied in cells C4 and C5, figure 7.29b shows the resulting formulae. This adjustment of formula, this adjustment, what is saying by this adjustment of a formula when copied to other cells is an example of Excel using relative addressing. This assumption by Excel, in this case, using the cell to the left and the one above it each time. Sir, please scroll along now. Oh wait, I have to expand. Alright, how far?
This assumption.
Excel. Alright. This assumption by Excel, in this case, using the cell to the left and the one two above each time, is useful sometimes, but does not help if you need to refer to an exact location on sheet each time, such as your discount value in P1. This explains why the copied cells return to an error or a result of incorrect, figure 7.29c.
Good. So let's look at the image here now. So the image in B is showing you exactly what I just described. So the formula for this $0.05 is equal B3 multiplied by B1. But when you bring it down, the B1 will increment. It will go up to B2, B3, and continue as you copy that formula. But we don't want that. We want the discount to remain as 5%. So we want to reference that 5% all the time, which should be cell B1. So that is why you'll get this error here. So you'll get this error of value because anybody could guess why we have a error of value? Anybody other than Nicholas? Sion, why do you think we got this error?
Sir, to be honest, you might just be cutting in and out, sir. So I didn't get to hear nothing.
Okay. Alia,
Yes, sir.
why do you think we got this error here, this error of value in the image C?
No.
Okay. Khadijah.
Sorry, sir. No.
Alright, I'll come to you, that's fine. Khadijah, Khadijah, okay then. Aaron, let's hear you. Why do we have this error?
Sir, because there's no number figure in B2.
Very good. So if you look at the formula at the top here, B4 times B2. But if you look at B2, B2 has a label of cost. So that is why it will not give you a value, or it will not give you any result, because it cannot calculate with a label. And that's why you got 10,000 at the bottom here, because it would have used this 10 here. So that would have been 10 multiplied by 1,000 to give you 10,000 here. Shania, don't you have EDPM? Shania? I guess you'll be absent from that class. So, in this case, we don't want the B1 to change because we want the 5% to remain the same. Alia, could you read the last paragraph for us? This one here?
From without?
Yes, from without.
Without naming one or more cells, absolute referencing, the formula might not work when copied to other cells, as shown in figure 7.30. Therefore, you should name the cell containing the 5% discount B1. To illustrate this, use the box in the top left corner of the spreadsheet to name cell B1 as discount. As the cells are copied down to cells C4 and C5, the result use absolute addressing to multiply the 5% discount in cell B1 with the correct cost in B4 and B5 for C4 and C5.
Good. So, I would have taught you guys before how to copy a formula, how to use autofill. I would have also shown you how to name a cell. So now you'll be making use of those features. So,
Sir, I got a quick question.
yes.
You know how you like if it's 1, 2, 3, right? And you just copy it and it's keep going down. How you just change it for like keep adding 5 and answer? I can't remember.
Alright, that's not show you. So, on the right side of the image here, what you can basically do to keep that 5% discount, you can name the cell as discount, because if you can see the formula here, they named it a discount, so as they autofill, it will continue to have that cell and perform the calculation. So remember we're looking at, alright, let me just show Malik this question. So if you have a 1 and you bring it down, it will replicate that 1. Now you have the box at the bottom here. If you want to fill it with, basically make it increment, fill series. But if you want it to increment by a certain number, you put the difference between the number. If you want it to increment by 10, you put two numbers that have an increment of 10. You highlight the two numbers, and then you bring that down, and then you autofill. Does that help, Malik?
Yes, sir. Thanks, sir.
Good. So let's now look at an example of how we can use absolute and relative addressing. Okay, that's what we're looking at. So forget about the heading, we're just looking at the numbers. 12, 13, 14. Good. Now, imagine this is a lengthy table. We have more information going down. So, at the end here, we want to calculate all of these information here. So, if I create a formula, say I want to multiply it. I want to multiply this 10 by this 12 here. So that's going to be B3 times C3. I click enter, and I have no results. Oh, I have this thing on. Yes. I get my results there now. Now, you could manually go and type all the formula, but that's going to waste a lot of time. This is where autofill comes in. You go to the very end, to the small square, you click on it, you drag down, and you have that formula there replicated. So remember at the top, I would have created B3 multiplied by C3. But as it is copied, as it is autofilled, the cells would increase. It would change relative to where it is being pasted. This is called relative addressing. The first formula have the cells to the left, two cells to the left. So wherever I paste that formula now, it will be always making use of two cells to the left. So even if I zoom out and I copy that same formula and I paste it till at the bottom here, notice it's still using that two cells to the left. That is called relative addressing. And it will change the cells relative to where it is being pasted. Yes.
Sorry, you cut out just now. I didn't hear what you said.
What I said is that the first formula, wherever it is using the cells in the calculation, for in my case, it is using the cells to the left. It's using B3 and C3. So when that is copied now, the formula, wherever it is copied, will use the cells that are relative to where the first formula was created. So the first formula was created with two cells to the left. Anywhere you paste it, it will use two cells to the left. I paste it till down here also, and it's still using two cells to the left. But notice it changed the cell names relative to where you have pasted. So I paste it at the bottom here, so it is using the two cells to the left, which is going to be F18 and G18. Does that help, Giselle?
Yes, sir.
So even if I created a formula, I think I would have showed you this already. Even if I created a formula till down here in E6 and I use cells at the top here, like this here. So notice the cells are still at the top, so they're one across to the left and about 4 to the top. So if I copy this formula and I paste it till over here, notice it still looks the same. This is called relative addressing. Wherever you paste it, it is still relative to where you paste it. Now, in this case with the table, relative addressing is useful because we want to do the calculation for these numbers that are in the row. But there are cases where, like in the PDF, you don't want a value to change, like this 5% discount. You don't want that value to change. You want to constantly use it to do your calculation. So, in that case, there's one of two things that you can do, and I need you to remember these two things. The first one you can do is to give the cell a name. So, Fancy, how do we give a cell a name? Madison, how do we give a cell a name? Mahima, how do we give a cell a name?
So you select the cell and then you go to the game box and put whoever.
Very good. Yes, Fancy?
Oh, sorry about that. Just gonna get copied. No way.
Okay. So, those of you who aren't taking in what I'm trying to help you now to see, we're gonna have a lot of fun when SB comes around. Because your SBA is making use of everything that I'm teaching you here. So if you don't try to understand it now, we're going to be having a lot of fun then. So you give a cell a name by going to the name box. So say for instance, we're going to use the same example. This is 5%. And we're going to say this is discount, so we name it discount. So in the formula now, equal, I want to calculate this 120 and I want to multiply it by the discount. So I can either type in discount because I already named it, or just like normal, I could have clicked on it so that I have that name.
Excuse me, sir.
Yes?
Excuse me, sir. Sir, there's another way to name the range of cells or something, right? You could click on it, then go to data on Google Sheets, and then there's a named ranges there, and you could add one and name it.
Yes, there's different ways. So discount, and I have my formula there, I have my results. So when I click and drag it down now, notice each of my formula has discount inside of it. So this is called relative addressing. No, sorry, this is called absolute addressing. Apparently can't spell absolute. So on the left we have relative addressing, and on the right we have absolute addressing. We use absolute addressing when we want a value to remain the same all of the time. so that we can do a calculation. So for example, this 5%. But if we don't want anything to change, we want to do the calculation based on the rows or the columns next to it, then we use relative addressing. So you have to remember when you use what addressing. Now, there's another way that you can use absolute addressing. Other than giving the cell a name, you can also use the cell's actual name, which would have been cell D1. So let me create that over here. So this is absolute addressing 1, and this is method 2. So in the formula now, we could have put D3 multiplied by D1 and then we put dollar signs in front of the column and in front of the row. So D3 multiplied by $D, $1, and then we drag that down. So notice it still remain the same. This is another form of absolute addressing. A dollar sign in front of the letter, the column, and a dollar sign in front of the row number. So there's two ways you can make use of absolute addressing. Either way is fine. So if I take that off, you see that the results are the same. So any method you can use, whichever you are more comfortable with. Alright, let's move on to manipulating rows and columns. Jonathan, can you read for us?
So sometimes, sir,
Yes.
sometimes you may forget to insert one or more columns and or rows in a table. However, you do not have to start over because spreadsheets have a function that allows you to insert rows or columns or both. Excel also usually to manages to adjust any cell references in formulae in your sheet to compensate for the change.
Good. Read.
When when you add a sorry, can I see? From
Yes.
when you add a row, all rows will automatically move down one row. For example, in figure 7.31, if you wish to insert a row above the word German or fifth row, you must insert a new row at the fifth row. The fifth row and everything in it will become the sixth row, and so on.
Good. Good. So say for instance we have this table here now, and say we wanted to maybe insert some information inside of the table. We can simply right click on wherever we want to insert that information. So what you need to remember is that whichever row you're right clicking on to insert, that row would get moved down. So I clicked on row 5 and it became row 6. So you right click on the row and you click insert and it gets moved down. So that's something you need to remember when you are inserting rows. When you're inserting a column, the column gets shifted to the right. So if I right click on C and I select insert, C got shifted over to D and it was shifted to the right. So that's something you need to remember when you're inserting rows and columns. Robert, could you read the rest for us?
Inserting a row or column offers four choices. Shift cells right moves the contents of one or several cells to the right. The contents of the other cells in the column are not affected. The contents of the cells located to the right of the cell being moved will also move to the right. Shift cells down moves the contents of one or several cells down. The other cells in the row are not affected. The contents of the cells in that column below the cell being moved will also move down. Inserts a row where the cursor is located. The entire row, alas, entire column inserts a column where the cursor is located. The entire column is moved to the right. The newly inserted column now appears to the left side of the selected column.
Good. Even though you skipped a lot of information, I think everyone understood. So basically when you're inserting, as I would have showed you, when you insert a column, it gets shifted down, and when you insert a row, it gets shifted downwards, and when you insert a column, it gets shifted to the right. Jasmine, could you read the rest for us? Jasmine? Sarah, can you read for us?
Shift cell left. Move the content of one or several cells to the left. The content of the other cells in the columns are not affected. The content of the cells located to the right of the cell being moved will also move to the left. Shift cells up. Moves the content of one or several cells up. The other cells in the row are not affected. Entire row deletes a row where the cursor is located. The row below the one deletes is moved up, not just one cell. Entire column deletes the column where the cursor is located. The entire column, not just one cell, is deleted, and the column to the right is moved to the left to fill the column deleted.
Robert, if you're going to be doing your own thing in class, you need to mute yourself first.
Yes, sir. Sorry, naman.
So, you can either insert a cell, delete a cell, or you can insert an entire column or an entire row. So, I would have just showed you to insert an entire row. You click on the row or the column and you click insert. And that way you insert an entire row and column. Now, what if you just want to insert a cell? So say right here, you just want to insert maybe a single cell. So you can right click, insert, and these are the options they were talking about. You can shift the cell to the right, you can shift the cell downwards, or you can insert entire rows or columns. So it's just as it says. If you shift the cell down and you click OK, you get an empty cell here and everything was shifted downwards. Now, when you're inserting the data does not change. Nothing changes. It's just that it gets moved to another area. So if I'd right click it here again, insert, shift to the right, everything was shift to the right. I have a empty cell here again. So the data was shifted, but I got my empty cell. Now when you're deleting, obviously that removes data. So if I right click here and I click delete, I can have the same options again. I can have the cells shift upward again so that it takes up back that space, or I can have it shift back to the left so that it takes back that space there again. Now once again, you can delete just like how you can insert an entire row or an entire column. You can do that you can delete an entire row or column also. You right click on the column, you have the delete option, and it deleted that entire column there. So obviously, same thing for the row. You right click on the row, you click delete, and the information gets deleted. Good, so this is what you were supposed to submit yesterday, today, and this also. Tomorrow is your presentation, so we'll see how we'll be working the exercises. Good. So that has brought us to the end of 7.3, and in 7.3 we're looking at a lot of functions and absolute and relative addressing. Is there anyone that needs any further clarification on the functions or absolute and relative addressing?
Sir, could briefly go over absolute addressing? I didn't understand that.
Sir, and VLOOKUP.
Alright, let's go over absolute addressing first.
Yes,
It's
sir.
shorter. Oh my god. Yeah. So to understand absolute addressing, you need to understand relative addressing first. So I have my headings here at the top. Now, this column here is relative addressing. This formula here is using these two cells on the left to do the calculation, B3 and C3. So when I copy it down now, wherever it is copied, it's gonna use the cells relative to the first formula, to the copied formula. So it was used from the left here, so the last one here is also using from the left, B10 and C10. That's relative addressing. Wherever you paste it, it is relative to where you are pasting it. Now, absolute addressing is when you don't want the cell to change. So in relative, you want the cell to change because you want the rows to be calculated. But in absolute, you don't want this 5% to change. So there's two ways you can prevent it from changing. One is to name that cell, to give it a name. I gave it the name of discount. So that name now, instead of putting D1 in the formula, which would have been D3 multiplied by D1, I put D3 multiplied by the cell's name, which is discount, and when I replicate that, discount remains the same all the time because the name won't change. The second method of absolute addressing is using the dollar signs. So a dollar sign in front of the column, a dollar sign in front of the row number, and when you bring that down now, that remains the same. So notice the other cells changed, D3, D4, D5. So that is like a combination of relative addressing with absolute addressing. Same over here, D3 all the way to D10 incremented. Same here also. But the absolute addressing part discount and the D1 with the dollar signs did not change. Did that clarify, Nicholas?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Understand now.
Good.
Wait, so I got a quick question. Is how far did name this come from? I didn't see it properly. Is where part this name from?
The name box. I would have taught that since the last class.
Yeah, I know, but the one is with is E3.
D1. The information is in
Oh,
D1.
aside. Thanks, sir.
Wherever the cell is, wherever the data is that you want to rename that cell, you have to click on that cell and then you go to the name box and give it that name. So if I want to name cell C12, I have to click on cell C12, see it showed up here, and then I give it a new name. Now, Giselle wanted VLOOKUP.
Yes, sir.
How am I creating a formula for VLOOKUP? Let's see. Students, Giselle, Alia, Robert, grades 2, 1, 3. Good. So this is supposed to be a simple example. Now, basically you use VLOOKUP like in another table. So if I'm creating you mostly use it like if you're creating another sheet. So I'm on another sheet. Let's use that example because that's the example, that's the situation you're going to be using for VLOOKUP. So we're on another sheet. Now in this sheet here, I'm going to create the VLOOKUP formula. Alright, before I do that, as I would have mentioned, you basically use VLOOKUP. So in an instance that you're creating another table and you want to pull over maybe grades from this table here. So I can put back students again. What was the name? Let me copy and paste. Delete the grades. So I want to pull over the grades. Just imagine that these grades are being calculated, and so instead of me typing back formula or typing back that results, I can use VLOOKUP. So whatever is over here gets pulled over here also. So VLOOKUP the first part of the formula or the first part of the syntax is the lookup value. What am I looking for? I'm looking for Giselle, this value here. This is what I'm looking for. So in cell B4, I'm looking for this word, this label, Giselle. So that's what I'm looking for, comma. The next part of the formula now is a table of array. Where am I looking for this value? I am looking for this value in this sheet over here and inside of this range here. Now, there's many ways that you can create this table array. What I just did there is one way. If you go back to the formula, or if you can see at the top here, y'all can still see my screen?
Yeah.
Good. If you see at the top here, notice it showed sheet 2 with a exclamation mark B2 to C5. What's happening here is that Spreadsheet recognized that I clicked on sheet 2 and that in sheet 2 I'm using this range here. B2 to C5. So that is the table array part. Now there's different ways you could have put in this table array. Um, B2 to C5 is the range. Now because it's in another sheet, it needs that name for the sheet in order to reference it, to know where it is located. Now what I could have done also, let me figure out how to come out of magnifier first. What you could have done also is name the range. So this is where naming also comes into play. I could have given this range a name. So I can name this range grades. So over here now, Chazelle is the lookup value, B4, comma, table array. Where am I looking for this value? And I use the name that I just created, grades. So this is the table name or the range name that I would have just created. So it's going to look in that range. The next part of the formula now is what column in that range do you want to bring back over here. So if I go and look at my table, I want the second column, which is going to be the grades. So in my formula now, after grades, comma, the third part, column index number, I put 2 because I want the second column. And then I'm going to put false because it is not sorted. So I'm looking for basically an exact value. Now enter, and I have the grades here of 2 for Chazelle. So if I change this 2 here now to maybe 10, over here is also going to change to 10. So it's like if you have the same information on different sheets and you want it to all synchronize, VLOOKUP is a helpful formula for that. So if I bring down this formula now to autofill to copy it, I'll get the rest of values. So notice, let me turn on this feature here. So notice B4 incremented to B5, B6 and so on. So the grades stay the same because that is a table name. The 2 didn't change because that's just a column number. But the grades, the cell names change because of absolute addressing here, relative addressing here, so that you can have for these different tables here. So if I change Robert to 1000, it will change over here also. Just so, Chazelle, did that help?
One clarification, sir. Which one of the sheet them did you name the range as grades? Sheet 2 or sheet 3?
Sheet 2.
Oh, okay.
But it doesn't matter where you name a cell or you name a range, because it is used inside of the entire spreadsheet. So, but let me not confuse you there. You're naming wherever you created the table. So I created a table. So say there's like a main table and a secondary table. The main table is inside of sheet 2. That is where the information is going to be. That is going to always be. And the secondary table, which is sheet 3, is where I'm pulling the information over to. So I have to name the table in sheet 2 grades, because that is where I am looking for the value. So, any other questions?
No, sir.
Go over the rank function just really quickly.
Rank? Alright, let me see if we can rank. So rank is The syntax is number whose rank you want to find, range of numbers, and the order of the rank. So the rank, the range, and the order of the rank. So let's see. Let's use their example. Money rank. Alright, let me just use money. $10. So we can put this all as money. 10, 20, 40, 50, so on. So over here is going to be the rank. Equal rank EQ, because that's the new one we're using. So the number is going to be the first part of the formula is basically what value you're looking at, or basically what value do you want to rank, what number do you want to rank. So that's going to be cell C3 because that's what I want to rank. So as you bring it down, it's going to increment to the different cells so that you do that calculation. Now the next part is the range. So the range is going to be this here, all of these numbers, because you want the rank inside of all of these numbers here. Now you could have done it this way, C3 to C6, that's the range, or you could have given the range a name also, that's up to you. And what order do you want it in? Do you want it in descending order or do you want it in ascending order? So that's the 1 or the 0 at the end. So ascending, and you close, and you copy your formula so that all gets the rank. All have a rank of 1. Oh, but you can't do this here. Well, you can do the absolute addressing again. So that, and that. Good. And we have our rank here. Well, it is correct because of that. Yes, Savitri, did that answer any questions or are you still confused?
Sir, I understand, but if two numbers have the same rank,
Uh-huh.
then it would
So,
just like continue. Let's say 20 and 20, they were the same. It would
good.
just
So that will
continue
happen.
from.
So both have the rank of 2 because they're the same value, but there won't be any rank 3. So you're going to continue with 4 because you have to count it that this is 1, 2, and 3. But because they're both the same value, you will have both will be the same rank, but in terms of numbering, it will continue 4 here. There won't be a 3 because one of them will be like a third space, but both are second. So it's a little technical thing.
Okay, sir.
Any other questions? Okay, so prepare for your presentation tomorrow. If you don't have any other questions, this has brought us to the end of today's class. Enjoy your lunch.
So yeah, your computer for this presentation, right?
Yes.
Sir, I don't have a computer, so you can't put me in on the partner.
Sir, quick question, right, sir?
Yes.
Sir, tomorrow, I ain't sure if my computer